what is the shape of U.S. power in those last 75 years, right? Basically, we're talking about since World War II.
Let's start with
So I think you and I both have some views about, this is a continuation of empire and of the desire to dominate and the ability to dominate. But I think you and I are both really interested in like how tech changes that and how the conditions of possibility change. I'm happy to go first, but like, I'm curious your sense too of like, what do you think power looks like? Like, what are the main kind of contours of it after 1945?
So, the way I think of power is in like three large buckets, right? There's economic, there's military, and then there's, you can call it soft or you can call it cultural or values-based, right? So that's my third bucket. And so for me, the way I think about power is I have a very economic power first view of power. So I believe that economic power precedes military or geopolitical power.
Yeah.
And the third bucket that I was talking about, which is, let's say, the cultural and the values-based power, comes as a way to facilitate acceptance of and the enhancement of the first two.
Yeah.
Right? So that's my view of power. And I think that the way the US has exerted its power globally has largely been driven first from its economic rise, both in the pre-World War I, pre-World War II eras, and that as a almost to be able to protect and advance its economic interests, the military imperative has then driven the military-industrial complex-driven power exertion and power influence over the world, and its set of bases that have continued around the world. And I think the cultural power of the US, right, the American values, the American democratic set of values, right, globalization, all of these values-based approaches of the US power exertion have helped the first two, right?
Yeah.
Enabled the first two, and they've almost all become a very it's a virtuous cycle, right? Each one feeding into the other, right? So that's my view.
Yeah. I think that's a great way to think about it. And, I can say sort of in those three categories, what I think has happened. My sense is that the old 19th century, early 20th century world was a world where it was fairly hard to exert economic control without having political control. And the reason that you see this sort of quote unquote great powers like scrambling for empire is, they're worried about getting locked out of resources. They don't trust that markets will stay open. So they have to like lock down colonies to make sure they have secure access to things like rubber. And then they're always like getting in fights with each other about like, wait, and like just something so trivial. I love this example is secure communication. Right. So like, if you're going to fight, you want to be able to like transmit long distance messages, and you want those messages to be received, and you want no one to be able to interfere with your ability to do it. And you want no one to be able to listen in. Okay. So like,
I've written about the Telegraph.
Yeah. So let's do this. Right. Because you might have a different view, but like, in the 19th century, the British get obsessed with what they call the all red line or all red map. Right. So what they need is not just a large empire. Right, of course, everyone wants that. But they need it all to be kind of contiguous so that they can run the goddamn telegraphs through every part without it going through any enemy territory.
Without the French or the Russians listening.
Yeah, exactly. Because, World War I, what is the first thing that happened? Is everyone snips everyone else's telegraph lines that they have access to. So you think, oh my God, like they have to do all this like incredibly difficult territorial stuff just to be able to send messages, right? Which for now, we're like, do they not have cell phones? Like that's like the most trivial thing to imagine for us. So my sense is that what changes in the kind of present, so like the post World War II present, is that the military stuff, the need to militarily like lock down territories, contiguous territories, all that diminishes. There's not a scramble for colonies among the great powers. There's a decolonization movement, and it's not that militaries aren't hyperactive, and not the U.S. military isn't hyperactive, but the kind of spatial forms it wants is military bases like all over the world, but not contiguous areas. And then the other kinds
Pointillist empire, I think that
Yeah, I call it a pointillist empire rather than a colonial empire, because if you look at where the United States controls on the map, you still see 5 colonies, but you also see like 750 military bases in outside of its states. Yeah. It's really, you just and it's really easy to just like not think about those bases, but you're like, oh my God, there's so many of them, and they're all over the world. So my sense is that the military territorial imperatives for control go down, because it becomes, all these technologies make it a lot easier to do cultural transmission and have the kind of economic relations in the absence of like that just like ham-fisted, like we must like seize Sardinia kind of view of how to deal with territory. So I agree with you on the 3, and I would just say that what we've seen thus far has been a kind of deterritorialization of power, such that the cultural and the economic transmission and influence, and if you want to call it empire, become easier in the absence of annexation.